Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret histories and little-known fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite TV shows, movies, music, and more. We are your two alarming yet avuncular animatronic animals of anodyne apocrypha. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh.
In the arms race of alliterative intros, I have fired another volley. And Jordan, today we're doing a rare for us return to the and more corner of the TMI universe for a discussion of the uniquely American phenomenon that merged the culinary, video game, and plastic ball pit industries and briefly revolutionized childcare as we knew it. That's right, we're talking about Charles Entertainment Cheese, or as he's better known, Chuck E. Cheese, the pizza rat. An animatronic nightmare, uncanny valley horror show.
Yeah.
He's called Charlie in Australia because Chuck is so synonymous with vomit there.
I didn't know that. I did not know that. But you know what? I feel like I always see, maybe I'm just imagining this, but the animatronic and cartoon versions of Chuck E. Cheese giving the thumbs up. And in Australia, the thumbs up is basically the middle finger. So,
well, Charles is, what a little stinker he is. In Australia, he's kind of a little rat bastard. I have such fond memories of attending birthday parties at Charles' Central Pennsylvania abode and forming my lifelong attachments to music and pizza and rats. I don't have any traumatic memories from this. But do you?
I have very little memories at all of this because my hometown in central Massachusetts was very spoiled for wholesome activities. Again, it's tiny New England town where I come from. I think we just got our second stoplight like a few years ago. We didn't even have a grocery store for a lot of my very early years, but we had a full-scale 100-year-old amusement park called Whalum Park, complete with water slides.
Ah, yes, you've talked about this before. Yeah,
we had a drive-in movie theater. We had not one but two bowling alleys. We had a video arcade and then a mall nearby that also wasn't in town but had another video arcade, two mini golf places, and a roller rink. All of these were 10 minutes from my house, basically. Exactly, none of these are open anymore. The last of them, the bowling alley, closed last year, which is, this is where we punch in Joni Mitchell's laugh. Paved.
Big Yellow Taxi Corner.
Yes, paved paradise, which in my case was a combination bowling alley and mini golf. And put up, I don't know what they put up, but anyway. So yeah, whenever I tell my friends about this, they're always like, oh wow, no wonder you love the 50s and 60s because that's basically when you grew up. And it's true. So I really wasn't exposed to the original Pizza Rat. The big corporate kids birthday emporium in my area at the time was called Discovery Zone. DZ.
Yes. Well,
you had Discovery Zones? Okay.
Well, no, Chuck E. Cheese beat Discovery Zone. Discovery Zone was a big everybody came at Charles, man.
Yeah.
Everyone, there was, and he crushed them all.
Yeah.
God, rats, dude. Yeah, no, Discovery Zone actually has failed, and Charles hung on.
Yeah,
I'm going to call him Charles.
Charles, yeah, he's earned that. Yeah, no, I mean it was funny. Once all the mom and pop amusements in town started shutting down when I was in high school, a Chuck E. Cheese did open in our local mall, but I really only went in there when I was working as a babysitter and brought kids that I was watching in there. And yeah, I don't know. My main thought after years of going to all these kind of rinky-dink places was that Chuck E. Cheese kind of seemed sort of soulless.
Soulless?
Yeah, I thought it was a little soulless. And the pizza's real bad. Real bad.
Yeah.
And there's the whole rumor that they recycle pizza.
Yes, which has been debunked.
I know.
Thank you. But
if you look at the pizzas, none of the slices fit together.
Yeah.
It looks like they're taken from...
Sure. I mean, yes, there is a horrifying uncanny valley aspect to any animatronic stuff, but I hope to disprove that assessment with this episode, which shows how much blood, sweat, and tears went into...
Pizza wasn't animatronic, Heigl. The pizza was real. And none of the slices
filled
fit
with blood.
together. It's not a circle. They're from different pies.
Well, from the company's roots in one of the most iconic video game brands of all time, to the semi-obscure animatronics whiz kid responsible for the famous robotic band, who later blew up a chunk of his inventory trying to invent an alternative cooking fuel, to the horrifyingly Dickensian official backstory of the rat. Here's everything you didn't know about Chuck E. Cheese.
Just never thought I would hear you say that.
It's never going to get old. Any discussion of Charles must begin with the man who birthed him, Nolan K. Bushnell. Bushnell was born in 1943 in Clearfield, Utah, to a middle-class family who were predictably members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a.k.a. the Mormons, and he bounced around Utah universities in the early to mid-60s, eventually graduating with a bachelor's in electrical engineering. As a young Mormon, Bushnell's dream was to become an Imagineer, Disney's catch-all term for its theme park designers and architects, and he worked at Lagoon Amusement Park, about 18 miles north of Salt Lake City, to put himself through college. He was made manager of the games department there and familiarized himself with the ins and outs of both the earliest forms of arcade games and the theme park business in general. But Bushnell upped sticks from Utah, moved with his first wife, Paula, and their 2 daughters to California in 1969 to follow his bliss. This is when we punch in...
Fortunate Son. Or if you're going to San Francisco.
I was going to say if you're going to... Well, we can always punch in Credence.
Yeah.
That just works for everything. Unable to get hired at Disney, Bushnell took a job at a division of Ampex called Videophile in Santa Clara. He explained to Medium in 2018, "I became infatuated with the game of Go and would drive to San Francisco every other weekend and spend basically most of Sunday morning playing Go at the old Buddhist church by Bush Street."
Do you know Go?
I don't. Explain to me about Go.
It's an old game from Chinese antiquity. Incredibly hard to play it. It almost looks like checkers. You have black and white little...
Oh, I've seen this, and I think I've tried to play it before, but
it's very,
was
very
not
hard.
Smart
very,
enough.
very hard.
Yeah.
But it had like a resurgence in the 60s as part of, anything that was from Eastern cultures was examined in California around that time. And it was like a real like hippie thing.
Yeah, that scans. And while at one of these Sunday morning Go marathons, Bushnell met a guy who worked at the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Lab. And he said to Medium, one day we got to talking, and he said, "Have you ever heard of Space War?" I was like, "Space War?" The first time I played Space War was at the University of Utah in 1965 or 1966. We left and drove up to the Artificial Intelligence Lab and played until all hours of the night. Space War, to the unfamiliar, is a space combat video game developed in 1962 and written for the newly installed DEC PDP-1 computer at MIT. It was a huge hit in the tight-knit early programming community of the 1960s, and since its code was in the public domain, it was widely recreated on other systems. And so Bushnell, seeking to recreate the thrill of playing Space War on a smaller and therefore more monetizable scale, in October of 1969, enlisted a guy named Ted Dadby because he was really, really good at analog circuitry, in Bushnell's words, and roped in a company called Nutting Associates, which phrasing, guys, come on, which was the only coin-operated machine manufacturer west of the Rockies. And by 1979, the first coin-operated arcade video game, Computer Space, made this nascent partnership $3.5 million and empowered them to start Atari, which is named for a Japanese term borrowed from the game of Go, which is basically equivalent of saying check in chess.
My sister's college dorm was on Nutting Street, and they kept having to replace the sign because the guys from the frat houses would keep going up and stealing it.
Yeah, which tracks. By recruiting their first engineer, Alan Alcorn, Atari set out to develop a workable arcade game that would be the springboard for a more commercial concept. The game they developed, though, as a means to a later end, became one of the most iconic video games of all time upon its release in 1972. That was a little game called Pong.
It is nuts how old Pong is. Like, it's just crazy to me to think that they had screen-based video games in
50 years ago?
Yeah, that's so crazy to me.
What's Bushnell's law, Jordan?
Bushnell's law is it's an aphorism generally attributed to the Atari founder, Nolan Bushnell. Says all the best games are easy to learn and difficult to master. They should reward the first quarter and the 100th quarter. Ooh, it's like life, really, yeah. But in the back of Bushnell's mind, it all came back to the roar of the grease paint and the smell of the crowd. I think that's backwards, but that's
No,
funny
it's
anyway.
not. I googled it.
Roar of the crowd and the smell of the grease paint.
That's the correct phrase, but the
Is this a joke?
yes, it is that's the musical. The musical is called, come on, you're a theater dork. It's a 1965 musical. That has it's the Spoonerism. It has it flipped. It's called The Roar of Grease Paint, the smell of the crowd.
Oh.
Come on.
Humor.
Come on. That's the musical that Feelin' Good, the Nina Simone song.
Okay, I didn't know
comes
that.
from.
Wow.
Come
Anyway.
on. Damn it, Runtagh.
Bushnell's associate Dabney said, Nolan had this brilliant idea. He's a carny guy. Back Mountains carny. And he thought a pizza parlor, a carnival-type pizza parlor, would be a great thing to do. He liked that kind of atmosphere, and he always wanted to build a restaurant that had that in it. And Dabney added to Fast Company in 2017. His whole thing was a pizza parlor with talking beer barrels.
Can you imagine calling anyone a
Back Mountain carny?
Back Mountain carny.
I forget how their relationship ended. I'm guessing not well. Bushnell rather loftily explained his pet project to Fast Company. He said, throughout history, there was a celebration, and the celebration had food, drink, and games without exception. Whether you were talking about the summer solstice with primitive man to the circuses in Rome, there was always an entertainment element. I always felt there was something that was lacking in restaurants. I wanted to add a dimension of fun to the act of having a meal.
And a rat.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, we can't really have people killed like we could in gladiatorial times. So what about a robot rat? That's the next best thing. Bushnell told Mel magazine, Atari was selling coin-operated games for $1,500 to $2,000, and during their lifetime, they earned $50,000. I felt that I wanted to be on that side of the equation as well, but I didn't want to compete with the people I was selling games to, who were already in the existing locations. I had two goals: to create a big, freestanding arcade and to have a place that was kid-friendly. We knew kids wanted to play the games, but they had no place to do that, as bars weren't possible and arcades were teenage hangouts. And Bushnell supposedly at one point toyed with the idea of banning teenagers altogether from what would become Chuck E. Cheese. And I sort of had that sense myself as an 18-year-old bringing the kids I babysat to Chuck E. Cheese. I got the sense that I wasn't supposed to be there, but I was 18 and in the suburbs, and maybe I just didn't feel like I belonged anywhere.
How poetic.
Yeah.
No, I mean the whole history of arcades is really interesting, and they evolved from like they did evolve from the carny atmosphere and sort of the midway and boardwalk style stuff, but they did become basically training grounds for kids who couldn't yet drink. So there is an interesting liminal age zone there as far as the American cultural conception of teenagers. Now with rats.
Well, pinball was illegal in New York City from like the 40s to the 70s.
Right, because they were just like, we can't give teenagers a reason to congregate.
Well, that, and also it's a training ground for bars and gambling, really.
Good. Good, I say.
But back to Bushnell, he's quoted as saying, I decided pizza was the right food because it had a delay time that would allow for gameplay. Every food has delay time. I mean, isn't like pizza shorter in terms of prep time?
I don't know.
Pizza's cheap. Any idiot can make it. It's hard to screw up. I'm going to go with that instead.
Yeah.
But anyway, Bushnell continued. Back then, the most successful pizza parlor in the Bay Area was Pizza and Pipes, which had a deconstructed Wurlitzer theater organ. It was extremely successful when they had an organist, but it was quiet when there was no organist. Kids love organs. Everyone knows this. Kids love pipe organs. So, sorry, Bushnell continued.
I wanted Bushnell.
Yeah. I wanted entertainment that didn't involve labor. When I took my kids to Disneyland and I saw the Tiki Room, I felt that could be the solution. A mechanical, computer-operated entertainment system. All this seems way more complicated than it has to be.
Well, in a way, I mean, it's really the urtext of every tech streaming middleman now. I want the money from art to come to me without the trouble of artists. I want people to come to my place and spend money because they're interested in live music. I don't want to deal with musicians, you know?
Who does?
Well, fair. Funnily enough, though, other than pizza and pipes, musical pizza parlors had an extensive history in the Bay Area. Shakey's Pizza. Do you know about Shakey's?
I don't know about Shakey's, no.
Let me tell you about Shakey's Pizza. It was founded in Sacramento in 1954 by Sherwood Shakey Johnson and Ed Plummer. Johnson was a World War II veteran whose nickname came from the nerve damage he sustained after a bout with malaria.
Friend of the pod, nerve damage.
Johnson played traditional jazz piano in Shakey's to entertain patrons, and this evolved into him hiring musicians to play for them. And this is actually funny. It turns in that Shakey's launched a renaissance in traditional like Dixieland jazz in the Bay Area. They had a radio program that popularized the music as well, and Shakey's Pizza is named in the American Banjo Museum in Oklahoma for helping to popularize banjos throughout the mid-century.
Wow.
Yeah. And the other thing that they did was they would have the repertoire, the lyrics to the repertoire that the band was playing printed on their menus. So the whole idea was that you would go there and there would be a band playing and then everybody could kind of join in and sing along. Dinner theater.
Yeah. Reminds me of that Italian joint where the Wonders play and That Thing You Do.
Yeah, like the classic red sauce joint. Yeah, all that stuff, all these dinner clubs, all that stuff was so popular back before like CBGBs made combining food service and music disreputable. But like, yeah, bring that back. Bring back the Copa, man.
Oh, I know. I'm still so bummed that closed. Although I would imagine during our 15, 20 years in New York City, it was not a fun place to be.
Yeah, the bad kind of rat. By the end of 1973, Dabney had left the company that they had founded together. He told NPR that as Bushnell took over more and more of the company's operation and direction, quote, that was the end of our relationship. But in 1976, Bushnell, then the sole owner of the company, sold Atari to Warner Communications for $28 billion. He wanted to continue funding and developing what would become the Atari 2600, but he also wanted to establish his rat-based pizza empire. Dabney continued to the Computer History Museum in his interview. Bushnell finally got the money from Warner Communications, and he decided to do that Pizza Time Theater thing. And so he'd asked me if I wanted to go in with him. I said, no. I'd rather be your friend than your partner. So he says, okay, well, at least go take a look at my pizza parlor and tell me what you think. So I did, and it was crappy. It was dirty. It was noisy. The pizza wasn't very good, and this was a brand new place. So I came back, and I told him it was dirty. He said, I'll take care of that. I'll fix that. I said, also, it was so damn noisy, I couldn't tell when my pizza was ready, and the pizza's not very good. He says, oh, mediocre pizza is good enough.
That's true.
As every pizza parlor located in any amount of square acreage near a bar will tell you, yes, it is. According to a 2021 article in SFGate, Bushnell spent $2.5 million on R&D for his rat pizza idea with a company that made animatronics. I'm being a bit disingenuous.
Way overthinking this.
I'm being a bit disingenuous here because actually, as of 1974, he wanted to call this Coyote Pizza because he wanted these costumed characters, and he thought that a coyote would work. And so this is a very funny.
Work for what? What is
for the bit? For the bit, Jordan. He did this all for the bit. No, he was. I think there's. I mean, yes, he's like a tech dork loser, but there's something very sweet to me about being about working at a theme park as a kid and wanting to be like a Disney Imagineer, and everything else in your
life. Scale
that
dream down.
But everything else in your life just going back to this dream. Like, yeah, I made Atari. I made like one of the most successful video game companies of all time. I've made scads of money, but what I really want to do is the animatronic pizza parlor.
I had no idea. Well, first of all, that Atari was an American-based company. I assumed it was Japanese. And I also had no idea that the guy who created Atari had anything to do with, let alone founded, and was passionate about Chuck E. Cheese.
About Pizza Rat. No, we're putting the horse ahead of the cart ahead of the horse here. But what people of our generation know is Chuck E. Cheese is actually derived from the Chuck E. Cheese competitor that sprung up.
Right.
So Let me finish. He was at the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions convention when he saw what he thought was a coyote costume. He ordered one, and when it arrived in the mail and he started displaying it to Atari employees, was shocked to find out that what he had ordered was a rat costume.
Coyotes, rats, I don't know animals.
So funny to me. He was like, yeah, guys, it's a coyote. And apparently they pulled the bottom half of this costume out and saw the long, slithery, naked rat tail. And we're like, Nolan, it's a rat costume. But he kept it in his office, named it Rick Rat, because he was not an ideas man. And this costume was occasionally donned by Atari employees at various company functions. So Coyote Pizza had to go away. Dabney, who's still developing the concept at this point, brought in a guy named Gene Landrum to help. Gene was this electronics gaming veteran who had done the rollout plan for the Atari 2600, and he told Mel Magazine, I went to Disneyland to do some research. They had hundreds of games, and you could go to the park and see all these animatronics, like the Country Bear Jamboree. And of course, they had Mickey Mouse. So I said to myself, I got it. They have Mickey Mouse. I can do Chuck E. Cheese. It sounds the same. So that's where I got it from. And Nolan had a rat costume in his office, so it worked out. They also say there's something in the repeated line is, when you say Chuck E. Cheese, you smile 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's some corporate speak. Another factor in changing the name, Landrum explained to Fast Company, was, we're making this a kid's place. We can't have a rat. A rat is too predatory and too lethal. Bushnell did this oral history for the Smithsonian in 2017, and he said, so I said, Rick Rat's Pizza. Went into the marketing department. They said, no way. They said, rats are dirty. This is a restaurant. You can't even say rat and food at the same time. I said, well, okay. Can it be a rat, but we'll just de-emphasize his ratness? They said, well, maybe that'll work.
How much of your life has been de-emphasizing your ratness, Heigl?
None. We could say, in some ways, that Gene was the founder of Chuck E. Cheese, Bushnell told Fast Company, because he was the guy I hired to bring Chuck E. Cheese into fruition. He was the guy that found the pizza recipes, he rented the facility, and hired the first pizza. He was very, very instrumental. Landrum also wrote the menu, designed the floor plan of the first restaurants, did all the stuff like revenue streams and gross margins, while Bushnell was sitting around playing with the rat costume.
Well, I have a question
Go
for
on.
you, and I mean, the term spirit animal gets thrown around way too much these days. But rats, for you, having known you as long as I have, it really seems to be
Yes.
It seems to have a special place for you. You wrote a song
Several.
in the band that we were playing. Yeah, it's true. Several. I love you, Rat Dad.
Yeah.
I want to ask you more about what rats mean to you.
Well, they're survivors,
Okay.
first of all. And I don't know, they were just well represented in media that I consumed growing up. I often think of Templeton
Yes.
from Charlotte's Web, Ratigan from The Great Mouse Detective, voiced
right.
by Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, some horror icon did that. I don't know. I'll say they're cute. They're cute guys. I like them. And like I said, tenacious.
Do you relate to rats?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. So yeah, well represented, diverse range of rats in children's media. That's the big 3: Templeton, Ratigan, and Chuck E. Cheese.
It's the trifecta.
Yeah. What
The
about
Holy Trinity.
you? The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Which is which of those 3 rats,
gosh.
media rats you mentioned?
Oh gosh. Templeton's probably the first, right? So he's the Father.
Okay. Yeah.
Ratigan, the Holy Ghost, just because it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's your new band name.
Holy Rat Ghost. Rat Holy Ghost.
Ratigan the Holy Ghost.
Ratigan, the Holy Ghost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Verbal contract. That's trademarked.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
Anyway.
Yeah, let's get this back on the track. Well, guided by a current copy of the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions Directory, Landrum also started sussing out who would build the animatronics at this restaurant would be anchored around. By virtue of being the only company that responded to his request, Harold Goldbranson's Fantasy Forest Manufacturing was tapped, despite their primary expertise being mascot costumes rather than animatronics. So they just had all these mascot costumes and just, we'll stick some pistons in there, it'll be fun.
Yeah, really.
Wow. Okay. After bringing the Goldbranson Corporation on board to create the costumes and animated puppets, Landrum hired Bob Allen Black, who was an artist who worked previously with Atari. Bushnell essentially handed him the Rick the Rat costume and said, yeah, make everything look like this. Atari artist Bob Flamate designed Chuck E. Cheese and other characters, while engineers such as Larry Emmons and Ron Miller of Atari's Grass Valley, California think tank, Cyan Engineering, provided the mechanical designs for them. Mike Hatcher programmed many of the robots' movements, which were powered by pneumatic pistons and triggered by computer controls from signals on a pre-recorded reel-to-reel tape that could be shipped to each store. At first, the characters were essentially animatronic portraits that spoke and moved out of frames mounted on the wall. But then animated torsos were seen from the waist up, and finally, the full-body robotic band, which didn't debut until many years after Chuck E. Cheese first opened. The first voice of Charles was John Whitlock, who modeled the rat's demeanor after a 1940s film character named Muggs McGinnis, played by Leo Gorcey in The East Side Kids. I might have a fact about this guy.
Uh-oh. Is that where we get the classic, like, oh, a wise guy, eh? Like that kind of like Joycey accent?
I think so. Leo Gorcey was somebody who was initially included in the Sgt. Pepper montage, but he refused to allow his license to be included unless they paid him $400, and the Beatles didn't want to start a precedent, so they airbrushed him out. And I believe he's on the back row. You can just see like a little bit of blue where clearly a head should be, and that was where he was, I believe. Yeah, there were a few other people that they cut out. Yeah, they cut out Gandhi because they were worried that it was just so soon after the Bigger Than Jesus controversy that they thought having Gandhi on an album cover would be a bad idea.
Ironic, because Chuck E. Cheese later got in trouble for saying he was bigger than Jesus.
They had a Brian Wilson mannequin that they didn't add, and I think they had a cutout made of Hitler from John, and for the same reason that they didn't put Gandhi in, they decided it's probably not the best idea. Anyway, as the arc of the universe must, turn to my beloved Beatles. Anyway, the original voice of Chuck E. Cheese based his voice on that character from, an old 40s gangster movie, East Side Kids. Originally, Charles Entertainment Cheese was pictured holding a cane and a cigar, with the cigar incorporated into both the walk-around costume and the animatronic version of the character. But it was officially discontinued in 1980 when Chuck E. Cheese gave up smoking during the Great American Smokeout campaign.
You know that giant rat we have walking around cracking wise in a Jersey accent? Lose the cigar. That's the most off-putting thing about him.
Anyway, the original voice of Chuck E. Cheese, John Whitlock, voiced him from 1977 through 1984. And on the original demo reel, I guess he performed the voices for all of the characters at Chuck E. Cheese, but production decided to go with different voice actors to decrease the amount of post-production work required. And Whitlock was allowed to choose which character he wanted to keep working on, and perhaps wisely, he chose the titular rat.
Mike Hatcher was the man behind the original portrait-style animatronics. Bushnell told The Atlantic in 2013, Mike was a really good programmer, a puppeteer, and a screenwriter. He wrote and designed the authoring system that programmed the units. He'd sit back with the impresario and program the movements one at a time, basically to coordinate with the tape. San Jose Mercury News ran a short story about Hatcher in 1979 that revealed it took him 3 hours of programming for every 1 minute of animation. There were often 200 movements going on at once during the shows, and also Hatcher worked the graveyard shift because he had to troubleshoot all this stuff after it closed.
You have to see have you seen the original portrait one?
Oh yeah, they're amazing. They're so beautiful. I love them. I want this in my home. We're trying
this one I just sent you?
Yeah, it looks like a drag queen.
Okay.
Looks like a rat drag queen, like with the heavy lidded eyes. Beautiful. All the characters were built on pneumatics, i.e. pushing compressed air through a series of tubes. Factories are run on pneumatic, Bushnell told The Atlantic. Components are cheap and they never wear out. They just run and run and run. It's probably the most robust motion technology in the world. You start.
Who called the internet a series of tubes?
God, it was. I don't remember.
Ted Stevens. Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska.
You start with the armature and then you dress it, he continued. And if you want some fun nightmare fuel, you should Google Chuck E. Cheese armature. Pretty much, they were the same inside. There were two different jaws, if you're a dog versus Mr. Bunch. If you were a snout animal, you had a different jaw. We also had one for beaks. They just look like Furbies if you take the skin off.
I did Google Chuck E. Cheese armature, and I wish I hadn't.
Good. Fun fact, in 2017, Insider reached out to Chuck E. Cheese's corporate office for the official backstory of the name Charles Entertainment Cheese and was told, unfortunately, we don't believe that Charles has ever been on any official literature or documentation we can provide to you. By public relations manager Christelle DuPont. I Googled this woman to make sure this wasn't a hoax. She is quoted in all of these articles about people getting in fights at Chuck E. Cheese's. She's just like, Charles does not condone violence.
Yes, he does. Look at him.
Yeah, he clearly does. But she pointed the writer to an official online biography of Mr. Cheese, reportedly written in 2004 to aid in a rebrand of the character when he was redesigned more mouse-like, thus betraying his roots. The rough outlines of it are as follows, and I'm paraphrasing. Chuck E. Cheese grew up in an orphanage called St. Marinera's, where... Yeah, it's pretty good, right? Where, as an orphan, he was unaware of his own birthday, but loved celebrating others. When he became of age, he moved to New York City, where he was homeless, and sought shelter in a pizzeria, where the owner attempted to kill him before hearing his beautiful singing voice, and subsequently decided to keep the rat employed to sing to customers.
Imagine him sounding like Tony Clifton.
Or Tony Bennett.
All right. Wow.
But during his first ever performance, Charles got stage fright, and he was booed by the crowd until he saw a child wearing a birthday crown and was moved to sing beautifully. The crowd cheered, and the pizzeria became the most popular spot in town. The last line of the story is, Chuck E. Cheese hasn't stopped singing or smiling since. It's like A Star is Born.
Oh, that's like as bad as the Sonic Bible. Wow. Well, it was Chuck E. Cheese's time to shine. The first Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater opened on May 17th, 1977 in San Jose, attended by Mayor Janet Gray Hayes.
I mean, it was a big thing. Like
big guns here.
It was a big thing. Like they were like the guy from Monopoly, the guy from Atari is opening essentially like an amusement park in San Jose. It's a big deal. Come on.
It operated out of a 5,000 square foot former brokerage building, was loaded with $120,000 worth of arcade games, and what is referred to as, quote, a huge toy Swiss cheese for kids to bounce around on, and of course, Charles himself. Early newspaper stories couldn't decide on his exact background. They're perhaps baffled by his accent as West Coasters. The UPI story reads, there's also a character costume. There's also a character costumed as a giant rat called Chuck E. Cheese, who escorts customers to their table with a Brooklyn accent. The Sacramento Bee, however, referred to him as Chuck, a streetwise Jersey rat. I would argue, can it be both? Bushnell, no doubt thrilled that his long-held, most impossible dream has finally become a reality, told The Atlantic in 2013, I chose pizza. He's explaining the method to his madness. I chose pizza because of the wait time and the build schedule. Very few components and not too many ways to screw it up. I didn't have any preconceived idea that I knew how to run a restaurant, but I knew simple was better. Again, it's Bushnell's law for video games translated into restaurants, kind of. The reason for doing the animals, believe it or not, was not for the kids, he continued. It was meant to be a head fake for the parents. Kids are really smart at knowing how to play their parents, and the kids knew if they said, I'm going to go to Chuck E. Cheese and play the games, the parents would just see themselves as spending money. But if they said, I want to go see Chuck E. Cheese Entertainment, and it's free, they'd be good to go. The other thing was that we wanted the parents to have something to amuse themselves while the kids were in the game room. If you listen to the dialogue by these animatronic figures, it was fun, edgy stuff, kind of like Toy Story, written as much for the parents as the kids.
Yeah, there was actually quite a divide between, like, he talks about some of the earliest scripts were, like, a little bit more risque, like, they had, like more vaudeville humor, like, Chuck E. Cheese was kind of a dick to some of his, like, band, like, other guys in the band.
Look at him!
Well, everybody would, crack, rip on, I think, like, the Hillbilly Dog. And they actually, at one point, had a separate room, for adults. They had, like, a separate lounge. They had, this separate room had performances by Dolly Dimples, who is a hippopotamus keyboardist singer with breasts, who sang torch songs and bantered with people.
Cigarettes,
yes,
Tiparillos.
Yes, exactly. Despite the apparent success of the pilot store, it caused friction between Warner Brothers and Bushnell. They didn't like him, as they saw it, shirking his Atari duties to focus on his pizza rat. John Ellis, Atari's VP of Consumer Engineering at the time, told Fast Company that Bushnell had told him around 1976 to investigate creating a robot that can mix drinks and bring them to you, which I love. Bushnell told Fast Company, I had spent a lot of money and a lot of engineering time on a lot of projects that I thought were the future, and Warner didn't want to have anything to do with them. So in June of 1978, Bushnell bought the first Pizza Time Theater, as it was called then, in San Jose, and all of its intellectual property rights from Warner's for a mere $500,000, and opened a second location nearly 4 times the size of the flagship that was at the time the country's largest pizza parlor. They thought he was a sucker, Bushnell's friend and fellow Atari pioneer Alan Alcorn told Fast Company. But Bushnell quickly incorporated the business into Pizza Time Theater Inc. and began expanding his empire. In fact, by November, he'd left Atari completely to focus on Pizza Time Theater, which he did by pursuing franchising deals across the country. One massive one in particular with Bob Brock, president of Topeka Inn Management, who'd made his fortune as the largest franchisee of Holiday Inn hotels in the United States. Remember that name, folks. During 1978 and 1979, Bushnell invested $1.5 million of his own money into Pizza Time Theater for 2 additional locations. But Casey Kasem voice. But trouble was on the horizon for Bushnell, Charles, and the nascent empire they were building together.
Well, 1980 saw the advent of arcade classics like Missile Command, Berserk, Centipede, and perhaps the most famous of all, Pac-Man. In the next year of its pixelated life, Pac-Man would earn over $1 billion in quarters in the United States, much of that at, you guessed it, pizza parlors. Video game designer and Washington University professor Dr. Ann Bogost wrote at The Atlantic in 2013, as tavern culture gave way to the video arcade of the late 70s and early 80s, secondary pursuits like ordering food gave way to the primary pursuit of additional gameplay. Chuck E. Cheese was an arcade. Its games encouraged continual play and cross-cabinet play. It was a restaurant. Food and drink drew players to the locale and kept them there longer. And it was a midway. Players collected tickets from games of skill and chance like skee-ball in hopes of exchanging them for prizes.
Again, this is just so fascinating to me. I mean, the guy created video games and then jumped headfirst into like the arcade culture of the time. It's just so culturally, it's so interesting. Anyway, I'm doing all this throat clearing is to explain why Charles quickly had a target on his disgusting rat back. In the early 80s, the ripoff of Pizza Time Theater proliferated. You could visit Bullwinkle's Family Restaurant, Major Magic's All-Star Pizza, Celebration Station, Fair Play Pizza Theater, and Razzmatazz. All of these that have like theater or pizza or celebration in the name, and some dude was like, we'll call it Razzmatazz.
I mean, that's very theatrical. I'm more interested in the Fair Play Pizza Theater because I just think about Lee Harvey Oswald's Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
Not the reference I would have gone with, but yes. And of course, among many others, there were many of these. But the most famous one is Showbiz Pizza Palace. Showbiz opened their first location on March 3rd, 1980, and they are the true villain of this story. Remember Remember from a few paragraphs ago, Bob Brock, the Holiday Inn magnate who signed a deal with Bushnell to franchise Chuck E. Cheese's? Well, while visiting the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions convention in New Orleans in 1979, Bob Brock met a guy named Aaron Fechter. Fechter is the Nikola Tesla, insane, misunderstood, got his timing all wrong genius of the animatronics industry and also this story. This kid founded a TV repair company at the age of 11, which subsequently failed because he couldn't lift the TVs he was repairing. And then in 1973, at the height of the oil crisis, when he was 19, had this pie-in-the-sky idea to design a car that would get 90 miles to the gallon. He called it the Jutta, and it was essentially a glorified golf cart. It had 3 wheels, and it was a ridiculous, ridiculous thing. You have to look up the concept art for the Jutta. But he was also like a very sweet utopian idealist. And while trying to fund the Jutta, he turned to a variety of ideas to finance this, one of which led him to discover his true talent, which was the design and manufacturing of animatronics. Fechter also claims to have invented the Whack-A-Mole, the arcade game. His story was that he was at the 1976 IAAPA convention, and someone pointed him at this Japanese gaming company's booth where they had a Whack-A-Mole-like machine, and they were like, that thing's a piece of crap. We could make some real money if we designed a better version of that. So Fechter built a better Whack-A-Mole machine using pneumatics, and then claimed that the credit was stolen out from under him by the guy who contracted him to do that work. But that's kind of contested, and also neither here nor there. But yeah, he basically created a company called Creative Engineering, Inc., which took off, was doing millions of dollars of business out of Orlando, selling animatronic characters to theme parks. And he's such a sweet boy. Bit of an egomaniac, but a sweet boy. There's a 1982 Orlando Sentinel article where he waxed about ending foreign fuel dependency with solar power, using industrial automation and robots to create a 3-day, 6-hour-a-day work week for the working class, and then basically pitches the modern internet as we know it. And this quote is wild. He said, "We would like to pioneer and invest in large amounts of money in pioneering a central organized network in tying home computers together. What we want is for you to be able to type in water heater and get up a list of people who can sell you one or repair one, along with a Better Business Bureau report or consumers report." Then, after he got out of the pizza animatronics game, he invented a secure email device called the anti-gravity machine, which was basically a way to send lockdown, ultra-secure emails. The guy was just this kind of, like I said, Nikola Tesla, like wild-eyed tech innovator who just never made a lot of money. I mean, he did at one point, but has never really he never got his Tesla coil, is what I'm trying to say here. Anyway, at the 1978 IIPA convention, he debuted his real triumph, the Wolfpack 5, a group of animatronic singing animals inspired by the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I met Bob Brock at the end of 1979, and at that time, he'd already signed a deal with Nolan Bushnell to build 280 Pizza Time theaters, Fechter told Mel Magazine. I'd previously met Nolan Bushnell in 1977 and 1978, and he'd wanted to sell him my animatronics for his Pizza Time theaters. But I didn't trust him. I figured he'd just buy one character from me, get it to California, and then reverse engineer it and start copying me, so he'd never buy another character from me. So I refused. To make a long story short, Fechter says that when Brock saw that there was someone out there making better singing animatronic animals than Bushnell, he decided to back out of his deal with Bushnell and join forces with Fechter to launch a Chuck E. Cheese competitor. At the crux of his argument was essentially the fact that he claimed that Bushnell downplayed Aaron Fechter to him. He said, "Hey, I heard about this guy Aaron Fechter who builds these animatronics." And Bushnell told Brock, "That's just a kid making junk in his garage." And then he went and saw the Wolfpack 5, along with the other thing that he created, the Hard Luck Bears, which were indeed a ripoff of the Country Bear Jamboree, and saw that they operated more smoothly, had a wider range of motion than the existing stuff at the Pizza Time theater chain. And so he decided, I'm going into business with this kid. And at the crux of this deal was the Rockafire Explosion Band, which is, if you are roughly of our demographic age, the band that you saw at Chuck E. Cheese's. And that band was a combination of the Wolfpack 5 and the Hard Luck Bears, featuring the characters Rolf and Earl, Duke LaRue, a keyboard-playing gorilla named Fats Geronimo, Beach Bear, Mitzi Mozzarella, Billy Bob Broccoli, and the Looney Bird.
So it's a combination. So it's basically like Guns N' Roses, where the two bands. It's LA Guns and...
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so. Aside from the fact that the Rockefeller presentation utilized 3 stages, which gave them more flexibility in how they could stage these shows, Fechter's animatronics work was, pun intended, head and shoulders above what existed at the current Pizza Time theaters. A Wilmington Morning Star article about showbiz broke down the numbers behind the Rockefeller explosion. It's from 1984. It cost $2 million to develop, and it was sold to franchisees for $125,000. The characters were built in groups of 25. It took a week to build a group of 25, or it took a week and a half to build a group of 25 over Orlando. It took 24 hours to program all of them to perform one song. Each character had 16 valves as part of its pneumatic system, and about 150 gallons of compressed air necessary to run it.
Wow.
Fechter himself also wrote all of the songs for this, which took about 350 hours to record and produce the songs that they were playing, which were all these like 50s and 60s doo-wop. They also
he did all the voices too.
Not all, some of them, but he wrote these songs. Just really a jack of all trades, this guy. And they would do like Beach Boys medleys and like Beatles medleys. And at one point, there was also one of them doing there was Michael Katzen, who is an animatronic large cat who did Michael Jackson songs.
Oh, that's good.
That's the most serious you've been this whole episode. Oh yeah, Michael Katzen. That's good. With dollar signs flash up in your eyes. With a 20% share in the Showbiz Pizza chain, Brock held the other 80%. Fechter, at long last, had the financial and creative freedom to pursue his singing animal animatronics dreams, handed the financial management of his company over to his dad to focus on programming, choreographing, and voicing these characters. Michael Jackson visited the Showbiz company headquarters between tour stops on the Thriller tour. You can see pictures of him posing with these things, and he was supposedly, I have been unable to verify this, I choose to believe it's true, was supposedly moved to purchase the Beatles catalogs after seeing the Beatles medley at a Showbiz Pizza. Fechter told Fortune magazine in 1982 that Brock is benefiting financially from this deal. He's making money, but I'm going to change the world.
If I can find it, I want to punch in the Showbiz Pizza Beatles medley right here.
I think you should.
Wow.
Well, I played you the one that made you so angry. Eat a little pizza with some help from our friends. Temporarily rendered you speechless.
I guess I got to punch that in right here.
We get by with a little help from our friends. We eat pizza pie with a little help from our friends.
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages.
Well, predictably, Bushnell's Pizza Time and Showbiz Pizza immediately took aim at each other in the market and expanded too fast, too soon. A Showbiz Pizza superfan named Travis Schaefer, who runs what you describe as an incredible fan site called showbizpizza.com.
It's insane.
Told Mel Magazine.
It has all of these scans of these original newspaper articles. This man he's on our level. I was saying.
Well, we should have had him on. Damn it. Well, he told Mel Magazine, since Brock dropped out, they were hurrying to add franchises all over. They only had a handful by 1980, about 6 to 10 restaurants. So to suddenly expand like that was a big undertaking. Original animatronic designer Harold Goldbranson told me that they wouldn't even consider a mom and pop organization that only wanted to open one franchise. They only wanted big money people who could open several stores.
Do you know the lineage? So the Beatles band there was called the Beagles because they were dogs. Only 4 of them are known to exist.
Fittingly.
One is in a museum. Another is at a
museum.
Exactly. One is at a gas station, and 2 others have been retrofitted into, respectively, the Biscuits, a parody band of iconic Glenn Danzig starring punk band The Misfits. And then yes, and then again retrofitted into Ruff, a dog animatronic themed Rush parody.
No.
And the last one is owned by a collector and YouTuber. When the Beagles were phased out, they were replaced by the Beach Bowsers, which were a Beach Boys parody.
Wow. And Fector, the animatronics designer, later told Mel magazine, "We had to beat Chuck E. Cheese to the best locations. So the executives of Showbiz Pizza were growing so fast their heads were spinning and spending money way too fast. They were out of money before they even knew it. And by 1983, they decided not to build any more restaurants, but it was already too late."
Bushnell, obviously infuriated by Brock's betrayal, sued Showbiz Pizza pretty much immediately, and Brock shot back with a countersuit. This battle dragged on in the courts for years, but Showbiz settled in 1982, agreeing to pay a percentage of their profits to Chuck E. Cheese for the next 14 years. Something like millions of dollars over almost a decade and a half. So next time you think you lose big in a court.
But there was an even bigger problem for both musical animatronic pizza chains, the free market. 1983 through 1985 became known as the video game crash, a spectacular bottoming out for both the home video game market and arcades. Home consoles like the Atari and personal computers dented the appeal of the arcade, while once the novelty wore off, the limited experience of home video games ended up cratering their profits. This was largely and ironically due to two Atari games, the glitchy, buggy version of Pac-Man for the home market, and its rushed adaptation of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, legend in video game circles. It's failed so spectacularly that Atari was famously forced to bury the extra copies in a landfill in New Mexico. There's a whole documentary about it on Netflix. It's great. All told, in 1983, the arcade industry's profits dropped 40%. Between September and December, Pizza Time lost over $75 million and over $12 per share. And Bushnell resigned as CEO and the company filed for bankruptcy in 1984. Goodbye,
Sweet
Chuck E.
rat.
Cheese. Yes.
Do not go gentle into that good ball pit. Fascinatingly, one of the ways in which Bushnell lost money was experimenting with a company called Cadabroscope, which sought to reinvent traditional animation by using a computer to fill in hand-drawn frames of animation with computer-generated frames. In 1983, he bought a $1.5 million computer to aid him in this quest and hired a team headed by a renowned ex-Disney animator named Jack Nichols. The fruits of these labors were to be a 1983 special called The Christmas That Almost Wasn't, starring Charles and the rest of his gang, which was supposed to be aired on NBC. It was never aired, but does exist online. And here's the crazy part. Bushnell sold Cadabroscope, which he had hoped to launch an animated Charles media empire. He sold that company to Lucasfilm, who would develop that technology into Pixar.
So you got your Atari, you got your Chuck E. Cheese, you got your Pixar. This guy...
There are promotional photos from the time of Bushnell standing next to this bank of computers with Bob Pauly, who's the Pixar guy who designed Buzz Lightyear. He was like the Forrest Gump of Bay Area tech stuff. He also employed Steve Jobs at one point and sadly missed out on the opportunity to get on the ground floor of Apple.
What is this guy's net worth? Oh, only $50 million.
Well, he fumbled a lot of bags.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Showbiz Pizza had to do whatever we could to stay afloat, so we had to bring in money people, vultures, and they wanted to control Showbiz Pizza, control me, and control Bob Brock. So I began using my percentage to veto bad idea after bad idea, Fector told Mel magazine. Then they
You will never control Showbiz Pizza.
Then they had the worst idea of all, to merge with Chuck E. Cheese. We were fighting Chuck E. Cheese for 5 years, and we knew we were better than Chuck E. Cheese. They were crap, and we were great. That's what we believed. We were rivals. We don't want to buy them out. We want to kill them. If they're going to go out of business, let them go out of business. Don't prop them up. Kill the rat. Let me plunge the sword through Chuck E. Cheese's heart. I love Aaron Fechter. Perhaps because of this stance of his, though, the relationship between he and Showbiz soured to the point where they were only communicating through lawyers. Showbiz wanted the rights to the Rockafire explosion characters, but Fechter refused to sell, believing that his characters were on the verge of making lucrative deals via film and television and record deals. Narrator voice. They were not. So in 1990, he pulled out, and the companies, and actually Showbiz made a smart move because they were able to restructure all of their debt and this court settlement by buying Chuck E. Cheese. And then they embarked on something called concept reunification.
Sounds like the Chairman Mao did.
I was going to say, it sounds like the Great Leap Forward. Concept unification, where they skinned all of the old characters they didn't have the rights to anymore. And
again, sounds like something Chairman Mao would have done.
And put new fur and clothes on them. And you can see all of these training videos on YouTube where they're like, first, remove Geronimo Gorilla's face, then his clothes. It's truly incredible.
Well, by 2005, Chuck E. Cheese had grown to 500 locations, and its design had morphed from an adult with a tuxedo and cigar and cane to a teen with a baseball cap, which is how I knew him, and even more towards Mousedom in 2012, when Bowling for Soup's Jarrett Reddick became the character's new voice. I did not know that. In 2014, Apollo Global Management bought the chain's parent company for $1.3 billion, while in June 2020, the chain filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection after it was battered both by competition from other, quote, active play companies like trampoline parks, laser tag facilities, and Dave & Buster's, as well as pandemic-related store closures. But a little over 6 months later, according to the nation's restaurant news, CEC, Chuck E. Cheese Entertainment, announced that it had pulled itself out of bankruptcy. The rat truly is a survivor. It's really great that was the animal for it. Pulled itself out of bankruptcy, newly financially healthy, and afloat after a restructure did away with $705 million in debt. Wow.
But where the rat lost the financial war, he won the hearts and minds of the world. For example, Dave Ferguson, a Showbiz pizza enthusiast who grew up to be a defense contractor, teamed up with Chris Thrash, a roller rink DJ in Alabama. Sounds like a romantic comedy. He's a defense contractor. She's a roller rink DJ in Alabama. Together, they
save an animatronic rat.
Together, they're rinking around. I don't know. There's no bad ideas in brainstorming. The two of them purchased a number of decommissioned Rockafire animatronics, and using software that Ferguson developed to program all of them, began uploading videos to YouTube of these zombie Rockafire bands performing contemporary songs, among them Bubba Sparks' Ms. New Booty and I think Usher's Love in the Club, amassing thousands of viral hits. And this increased visibility actually had material rewards for Fechter. Thrash opened his own restaurant in Alabama with all of these characters that he'd bought. CeeLo Green booked the Rockafire explosion to back him in a Vegas performance, and Ryan Gosling put them in his directorial debut, Lost River. But Fechter was horrified. He told Popular Mechanics in 2016, "I hated it. That was my first reaction. Absolutely hated it. Those were adult songs. That's not the Rockafire audience." He sued Ferguson, saying, "David's my whack-a-mole. If he pops up again, I'm going to bring that hammer down."
The trash talk between these guys is really great. Well, funnily enough, Chuck E. Cheese had an actual corporate policy in place to discourage an aftermarket industry. Employees were told to either destroy old costumes, as seen in 2017 when a video surfaced of some employees at a recently shuttered Illinois location smashing a costume head with a sledgehammer, or to break them down into their constituent parts and ship them back to a hub for repurposing.
I believe his actual verbiage that he used was, even if the head is past its useful life, our practice is to take all of the parts off the head, so we salvage the nose and ears and some of the other parts. Much like Jeffrey Dahmer. Ed Gein? I don't know. Punch a better serial killer reference into that. Meanwhile, in 2014, the animatronic pizza animal industry was dealt another blow by Five Nights at Freddy's, a massively popular horror survival video game series in which players attempt to live through the overnight shift at a Chuck E. Cheese-esque children's pizza parlor, battling off evil animatronic characters. while online chatter said that the game was supposedly inspired by a real-life 1993 shooting at an Aurora, Colorado Chuck E. Cheese's. The creator said it was actually just the poor reaction to his previous game that inspired it. They said his lead character looked like a nightmare animatronic character. So he said, I'll show you. Aurora, Colorado, of course, being famous less than 10 years later for another mass shooting.
There's also a low-budget Nicolas Cage horror movie called Willy's Wonderland that came out in 2021, which features Cage battling an array of demonically possessed children's animatronics in a setup surprisingly similar to Five Nights at Freddy's. And Fector capitalized on Five Nights at Freddy's by hosting themed birthday parties at the near-abandoned creative engineering headquarters in Florida, where the Rock-afire explosion performs before shutting off the lights to emulate the haunted after-hours feel of the game. That sounds horrifying.
I'm going to send you a non-refundable one-way ticket to that and make them do all the Beatles songs. Can you imagine? You're in a dark, abandoned warehouse in Orlando, and a bunch of animatronic dogs are singing Beatles songs at you. Oh, I want that for you. I want your fear. You know, honestly, they don't really need to fictionalize the violence. Just Google Chuck E. Cheese fight or Chuck E. Cheese violence for an alarming, lengthy list of brawls and shootings at the restaurant. The chain has served alcohol at some of its locations for a long time, but I don't think you can really chalk all of it up to it. Just all of that. People have speculated it's the fact that it's a bunch of kids having kind of commingled, largely unsupervised birthday parties, and then a bunch of parents drinking and getting territorial in a very high stimulus environment. One Chuck E. Cheese's in Brookfield, Wisconsin, triggered more calls to the police in 2008 than any other restaurant in the city, including a biker bar down the street, which is just the news story I love the most. These days, Nolan Bushnell is based in LA, working in a bunch of video game and tech sphere adjacent kind of stuff. Aside from the recent 50th anniversary of Pong, the last time he was in the news was for releasing an NFT in 2021, which was bought by Brock Pierce, the Mighty Ducks actor turned crypto evangelist. Fector has continued to invent, including an experimental cooking fuel called carbohydrilium, which caused an explosion at a creative engineering warehouse in Orlando in 2013 that scattered old Rock-afire animatronic parts everywhere, which was a horrifying scene. Thankfully, there were no human injuries, but police and fire talked about showing up and seeing all of these old animatronic animal heads scattered everywhere. Chuck E. Cheese sadly began phasing out its animatronics in 2017 to the consternation of 90s kids everywhere, but Bushnell was sanguine about it. He told Gizmodo, "Animatronics were cutting edge when Chuck E. Cheese started. I try very hard not to live my life in the rearview mirror. I like change, I like progress, and I like new things.
And I like pizza.
And I like rats."
Sorry, what were we talking about?
Yeah, what was her? He just stared off into it's like those clickhole quotes. I like rats. Nolan Bushnell, unprompted.
Yeah.
One of the voices of Chuck E. Cheese, Duncan Brannon, told Mel Magazine, "Nolan Bushnell, those guys back then, it was just genius. Pure genius. It was so cool because we had watched cartoons for years, but to be able to go somewhere, sit down and have a meal and a game room over there, that already was cool. But then you could go over here and watch these robots do a show. It was outrageous, and it's created such a magical experience for so many families." I have nothing else to add to that. May all of you have both the joy and the terror that only a giant pizza rat can impart.
In life, you can't have the pizza without the rat.
That's the kicker. Folks, thank you for taking this journey down memory lane with Jordan, Charles, and I. I'm Alex Heigl. This has been Too Much Information. Thank you for listening.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeart Radio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.